Alright, so today we're going to be working with chalk pastels, and as you can see here I've got two separate containers. Typically when you work with chalk pastels it works best to separate them into cool colors, so blues, purples, and greens, as well as the warm colors which are pinks and reds and yellows and oranges. With chalk pastel, we're doing a lot of blending, we're mixing colors and things like that. If we have our colors together, our warm colors and our cool colors, a lot of time that's going to create a really muddy brown color. So it works best to keep them separate. So that's why I have those. We could also have neutral colors, so like whites, blacks, browns, tans, grays. But we're not going to be using much of that, so I kind of kept those separate. What we're going to start with today are 4 separate techniques. So we're going to have a long, thin black piece of paper. I'm just going to really quickly divide that into thirds. So I'm just adding 2 lines. Kind of hard to see right now, but with the pencil you should be able to see it when you get started. And then we have a separate white piece of paper that we're going to be using too. And then off to the side here you might notice I've got this cup. It's got some liquid at the bottom of it. That's called liquid starch, and we're going to be using that in just a second too. But there's one technique that we're mainly going to be using today, but I wanted to introduce you to a couple of other techniques as well. So one of the techniques, the first technique that we're going to be using is we're just going to be using the tip or the main edge of our chalk pastels. So when I do that, I'm just going to hold it kind of like I hold a pencil. The chalk pastels have been broken in half, and that just makes them a little bit easier to hold, and then we don't have to worry about them breaking anyway. So with that, I'm just going to use the tip of my chalk pastel. A lot of people don't like the sound or feeling of chalk pastels, which I totally understand, but just kind of one of those things. Certain materials just is what it is. So I can use the tip of my chalk pastel. I can make some different designs on my paper. I could leave it like that. Some people just like chalk pastel like that, but really when chalk pastel looks best is when we blend it. So the easiest way to blend chalk pastel is just by using your finger. And notice how I'm starting at the bottom every single time and I'm working my way up. That kind of keeps those lines a little bit more solid rather than just kind of going all over the place, and then my paper is going to start to get a little bit messy. So I'm just going to keep doing that. The other thing I could use, I don't have any with me right now, I could use a Q-tip instead, especially if you don't like the feeling, or even a tissue works pretty well. But that's one thing we can do. When we start to blend it, it starts to get a little bit lighter, so you might want to go back over it, make it a little bit more vivid. But I could make kind of like a cool like fire technique or something if I continue doing this. Okay, so that's one thing that I want you to try, just using the tip of the chalk pastel. Typically with chalk pastels we don't want to draw anything that's like too detailed. It works better for big splotches of colors. At least in my personal opinion. So I did something simple there. Now the other way, we could use the side. So under or above this one I just wrote tip, above this one I'm going to write side. And with that, typically when you use the side of a chalk pastel and we're doing some layering, you want to do your darkest color first. So now I have like a darker green color. It's kind of hard to see on there, but just explore using the side of the chalk pastel. I could do some layering. Okay, I could have it go up and down this time. Alright, but just creating different things. Same, again, if I wanted to, I could do some blending. I can create different colors, but that's something you can do. You could do use the tip of the chalk pastel over the side, whatever you like, but we're just experimenting right now. And then the last thing that I want to try out is using a stencil. And some of you might have done this before. I know most of you, if not all of you, have used chalk pastel before, probably with me. But I'm going to find a stencil, and I'm going to set it on my paper, and I'm going to put my chalk around the sides. Okay? And notice how with this one I mostly chose warm colors, cool colors. I'm back to warm colors here. Like I said, if you use colors that come from the same cup next to each other, those are analogous colors, they're going to blend together a lot better instead of creating like a brown color. However, I can pull up an example of a color wheel for you guys later. If you're using a color wheel, I know that purple, blue, and red are all next to each other on the color wheel. So I could use red and then put purple down and then blue in between if I wanted to. And then with this, I'm just going to remove the stencil and it should look like that. It would probably look cooler if I had like an actual shape, so like a heart or a star or something. I'll see if I can find some of those. But those are the first three techniques. Now the technique that we're going to be using today is going to be using this liquid starch here. So with this, it's really important, again, that we're using colors that are nearest to one another on the color wheel. So for example, I know that yellow and blue are going to make green. So if I wanted to, I could put yellow and blue with green in the middle, and that's going to blend together pretty nicely. So the downside with chalk is that it's really messy. You can see a lot of the little flakes and stuff around my paper. And so by using that liquid starch, it's gonna seal it, and it's gonna make it look a little bit more like paint. So I'm gonna dip my finger in there, and then I'm gonna start kind of massaging. And a lot of people, or I've heard it, this liquid starch compared to like elephant snot. It's kind of a gross feeling at first. It's a little bit thicker than water, but you kind of get used to it. So once I've done my first color, then I might start on the outside of my next color. Okay, and I'm blending. I like to go in like a circular motion, but you could go across like this. You can figure that out. Okay, and then I'm slowly kind of blending the two colors together. Okay, and if you want to, you can keep a tissue or a paper towel nearby to wipe off your fingers. But then I can go up to my yellow, and I probably should wash my finger. It's getting a little dirty. Okay, but I'm going to go like this. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to practice those 4 techniques before we get into the nitty-gritty of things. But yeah, that doesn't look great from this perspective, I don't think. But once we start getting into our actual project, I think you guys are really going to like this method.